What's up guys, today I'm going to install an airlift suspension in my camper van.
We started off by jacking up the van to let the axle drop away from the frame. Then remove the joist bumpers. We then started to prep the airbags to be installed onto the van. We installed the roll plate, 90-degree fittings, and air spring bracket. I then got under the van to mount the upper frame assembly bracket. And if you're doing this yourself, make sure you put the flange on the correct side. I then put the airbag in between the chassis and the axle. And once the bag was in place, I bolted the upper frame bracket and the spring bracket together. And we used nylon lock nuts and washers to secure this thing down correctly. I then set the axle clamp bar through the long carriage bolts. And using an impact driver, I slowly tightened up each side. And again, we used nylon lock nuts, washers, and lock washers to make sure this thing is secure. I then went to the other side of the van and repeated the same process. The reason we decided to install this airlift suspension is because our van is heavy, and we plan on traveling the entire United States in this thing. And I really just want to have a badass camper van that doesn't only perform well, but looks great. God knows where we're going to end up in our camper van. It's going to be nice to be able to have an airlift system that we can lift up the van a couple of inches if we need to. But anyway, I got the bag mounted on the other side of the van and continued the same process of making sure all the bolts are nice and tight and double checking everything to make sure it's installed properly. And on the side note, if you guys have a camper van and you're planning on doing a lot of traveling, make sure you change your rear differential fluid. And this is important because there's gears in your rear differential that cause your wheels to turn. And those gears cause friction, and that friction causes heat. And that heat will cause your gears to wear down a lot quicker than they're supposed to. So change your oil. So now that we have the airbags properly installed, it's time to install the air compressor. We strategically look for a place to mount it where it'll experience the least amount of moisture. Then drill 2 holes through the frame to be able to mount the U-bolt. The U-bolt is what will hold the air compressor in place. I then slipped the U-bolt through the holes that I drilled and mounted up the air compressor onto it. Using lock nuts and washers, I bolted them into place. Then it was time to run the air lines from the bags to the compressor. So I cut the air hose to size and installed the compression T-fitting to connect all the hoses together. And if you're doing this yourself, make sure you cut the air hoses with a pocket knife and not scissors. I don't know why, but that's what the instructions say. I then ran the air hose to the compressor to make sure it was long enough, and then went crazy zip tying the crap out of it to make sure it doesn't go anywhere. I then pushed the air hose into the air spring fitting connected to the airbag. Then plugged the wire harness the kit came with into the air compressor. We then self-tapped the ground right into the chassis of the van. I then crimped the air compressor and wire harness wires together. Then ran the wire harness to the front of the vehicle where the battery is located. I had to drill a small hole under the plastic trim to feed the wire through. Then I crimped the ring terminal to the fuse, and this part will hook up to the battery. I then crimped the other side of the fuse wire to the wire harness that comes from the air compressor. I then connected a ring terminal to the negative of the wire harness, connected it to the negative part of the battery, then connected the positive to the positive side of the battery. And I know that may sound confusing, but it's not. And make sure that your fuse is not connected into your fuse port while you're connecting the wires to the battery. Now that the negative and positive is connected to the battery, I can insert my fuse. Now it's time to turn on the system and make sure it works properly. I first set the PSI on the remote to 50 to make sure the bags would inflate. Then deflated them till they were about a ½ inch thick, then finally took the van off the jack stands. Something I forgot to mention in this video is that we added a heat shield in between the muffler and the airbag, and we also added an air filter to the air compressor. And now that the van is on the ground, let's test it again.
Alright, so 3 hours later, my hands are dirty, my knee is cut, I have metal chips all over my hair, but we got it installed, we checked it out, it works really good. So now we're going to take it for a test drive to see how it handles the bumps in the road, and then we're going to go out for a couple beers. I appreciate you guys for watching. Make sure to click that subscribe button. We'll see you in the next episode. Peace.